Greetings from the Jingle Truck. Where can you go to see the amusing poetry of Pakistan? Any place we travel in Chattanooga or around Tennessee. Poems adorn our vehicle to let people know that mother's prayers are the breezes of heaven, and to not tailgate because if you get any closer, we might fall in love. Enjoy the Southern Festival of Books from your Jingle Truck friends here at Art 120.
Good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of Humanities Tennessee, and I would like to thank our key sponsors, Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Ingram Content Group, Tennessee Arts Commission, Vanderbilt University, and Parnassus Books. If you are watching on Facebook Live or YouTube and would like to ask questions during the session, please download the festival app or visit the streaming site via the link at www.humtn.org/SFB. Parnassus Books is our bookseller, and your purchases of the books today via Parnassus help to keep the festival free. The festival is a free nonprofit event that is supported in part by donations from individuals. If you appreciate today's event and want to support it, you can do so by visiting our website at www.humtn.org. Please note, the festival inclusion policy applies online as in person. Anyone making inappropriate comments will be removed. For selected authors, books purchased via Parnassus will include a signed book plate or will be signed directly by the author. We will be letting those of you who have signed books available know. I would now like to introduce our wonderful authors. Kacen Callender is the author of King and the Dragonflies. Kacen's debut novel, Hurricane Child, was the winner of the 2019 Stonewall Book Award and the 2019 Lambda Literary Award, as well as a Kirkus Best Book Award of 2018. They were born in St. Thomas of the U.S. Virgin Islands and currently reside in Philadelphia. Kacen spends their time playing video games, as well as watching anime and reality television. Daphne Kalmar is the author of Stealing Mount Rushmore. Her debut novel is titled A Stitch in Time. Daphne was an elementary and middle school teacher for over 20 years. As an educator, her passion was exploring nature with kids, especially local creeks and ponds. She has an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts. I will now turn the discussion over to our authors to give us some short readings and tell us a bit about their books.
Thank you, Carly.
Hi.
Hi, Carly. Daphne, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm going to read from Stealing Mount Rushmore. Just the first couple of pages. This is historical, set in 1974 in Somerville, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. Chapter 1, Boston Herald American, July 15th, 1974. Moocher missing again. I sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, waiting for Dad to get home from work. Someone had stolen Moocher, the parrot, from the Stoneham Zoo again. I liked the look of him on the front page with his head tipped a little, staring at the camera in a friendly way. Teddy, my 6-year-old brother, sat next to me with his most precious possession, a 64-color box of Crayola crayons with the built-in sharpener. Moocher got stolen again, I said. We'd worried a lot about Moocher last year when he went missing the first time. Minnie, his mate for life, had been getting ready to lay some eggs, and she'd only take food from him. First thief must have read about poor starving Minnie in the paper like we did. He must have felt rotten about what he'd done since he turned Moocher over to a priest who gave him back to the zoo. Teddy looked up from his Batman coloring book. Is Minnie okay? She's got 2 little chicks this time. How big are they? Don't know, but they need Moocher to feed them. Teddy's got a sad kind of face to begin with, but the hungry baby birds made it way worse. They'll find him, I said, and he got back to filling in Batman's cape. Teddy believed I could fix any problem. Superhero who could make everything okay. I was only 13 years old with no superpowers, and there wasn't much I could do about finding a stolen parrot, but I wasn't going to tell him since he had enough to worry about. The article in the paper said Moocher was really friendly. People could walk around the bird aviary, hold out handfuls of peanuts, and he'd land right on their arms for a snack. He was a super rare kind of parrot, too, from some island in the Pacific Ocean, worth $1,000. That's a lot of money for a bird. But even so, crooks should stick to stealing cash and gold and diamonds and keep their hands off live animals, especially friendly parrots with baby chicks counting on them. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. No, I'll just keep going. I moved my chair a little so I'd get the air from the fan full blast and stared at the Mount Rushmore salt and pepper shaker sitting next to the napkin holder in the middle of the table. The president's faces on the shakers were kind of lumpy and pasty white. Salt came out of the top of the heads of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, who were stuck together. The pepper came out of the Teddy Roosevelt and Abe Lincoln heads. Jefferson's chin had a few chips where the 2 shakers fit together like puzzle pieces. I should have been on Mount Rushmore, but I wasn't. They're all men up there, carved into that mountainside in South Dakota. Dad was counting on the orderly arrival from left to right of a baby George, a baby Thomas, a baby Teddy, and finally a baby Abe. But after George showed up, I was born, a girl. So I ended up being named after a near miss, Susan B. Anthony. She almost made it up on that mountain, but Congress wouldn't spend the extra money. I think the money was a big fat excuse. Susan B. Anthony fought her whole life for a woman's right to vote, and Congress didn't want her up there giving the stink eye to those 4 presidents who got elected by a bunch of men. I'm going to stop there. You're on, Kate.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll go ahead and start from the beginning of King and the Dragonflies, which is about 12-year-old Kingston James, whose brother has just passed away. And he thinks that his brother Khalid has turned into a dragonfly. So he searches the bayou of their rural Louisiana town every afternoon searching for Khalid. But he also is struggling a lot, not only with the grief of having lost his brother, but having lost his best friend, because right before Khalid passed away, he overheard his friend Sandy Sanders telling King that he's gay. And Khalid said, you don't want to be friends with Sandy because you don't want other people to think that you're gay too, do you? So this is a lot about grief and processing grief with family, with his parents, and also identity and how identity can intersect as a Black and gay boy who's starting to learn about his own identity for the first time. I'm just going to start from the very beginning. The dragonflies live down by the bayou, but there's no way to know which one's my brother. I've never seen so many dragonflies around this time of the year. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands, just sitting on tree branches and rocks, baking in the sun, flitting over the brown water that shoots up from the dirt, zipping across the sky, going off their ghost-like wings, happy in their own dragonfly paradise. I want to ask Khalid. I want to ask him, why did you choose a dragonfly? Why not something cooler, like a lion or a panther or a wolf? And if he were still in the body that's now buried in the ground over in the Richardson Cemetery, he might hit me upside the head with his crooked grin and say, let me alone. I can choose to be whatever I want. And I wouldn't be able to argue because I know he'd be exactly right about that. I like to look for my brother in the afternoon by the bayou on the long and hot and sweaty walk back from school down the hard dirt road that leads between the thorny bushes with their big fluffy leaves and through the trees with their moss and vines, cicadas making their noise and birds whistling their tunes. Those trees always seem to be watching. Like they've got a secret to tell me, if only I'd stop for a second and wait and listen. Or it could be the ghosts. Just as my mom says, plenty of ghosts here in Louisiana watching your every move, so you best mind yourself. I'm doing exactly that, just minding myself, taking away some stones whenever they're in my path, thinking on my brother and dragonflies and the world and the universe, because it can be funny sometimes, thinking about how small we are, no matter what body we're in, when there's a crunching behind me. I turn and look to see a rusting white pickup coming, kicking up dust behind it. So I step to the side of the road and onto the browning grass, expecting it to zoom by, but the pickup slows down until it stops right beside me. There are a few white boys inside, but my heart drops into my stomach when I see the driver, Mikey Sanders. He was in my brother's class. He hated my brother. My brother hated him. But most people do on account of the fact that Mikey Sanders helped kill a man. No one says it because of who his father is. No one will admit in the courtroom that the older Sanders boy helped 3 other murderers beat a black man to death and then drag him all around the bayou. But everyone knows it was Mikey Sanders' white pickup truck that did the dragging. Same truck he's driving now, right here in front of me. He's got a sunburn across his face and tiny blue eyes and pale hair, so pale it might as well be white too. He's smoking a cigarette, even though I know he isn't yet 18, and he wears a collared shirt like he's just come back from church. My brother and Mikey got into fight, and I mean real throw him down fist fight. My brother said Mikey's a racist, and Mikey called him the N-word and made monkey noises and would leave bananas on his desk. He even tied up a t-shirt like a noose and put it on in my brother's gym locker. It's not surprising, I guess, given Mikey Sanders is the grandson of Gareth Sanders, and who was a member of the white sheep-wearing KKK. And now Mikey Sanders is here, looking at me like he's thinking of dragging me from the back of his pickup truck too. He doesn't say anything for a long moment, just looks me up and down, his truck's engine still rumbling and shaking, almost as much as I'm trembling on my feet. His friends in the passenger seat and the back seat are as silent as stone. Mikey flicks his cigarette to the ground and sucks on his teeth. I flinch, and I know how I must look to him. I look scared, like I'm about to wet my pants. I don't care, because that's exactly what I am. As scared as the day I was born and pushed out wailing into this world. I was scared to be alive then, and I'm scared I'm going to die now. Mikey finally speaks. Sorry about your brother. Sorry about your brother, he says. I don't answer him. I don't know if he's serious, if he's joking, or if he's just being plain mean. He shrugs like he can hear all my questions and he doesn't know any of the answers himself. What are you doing out here? He says, eyes scanning the trees all around me. I still don't say a single word. Is he trying to figure out if I'm on this road by myself, trying to see if he can get away with killing me too? He looks my way again, still sucking his teeth. Must be a piece of food stuck way in there. We're headed into town. He rubs his nose. Want to hop in the back? Something possesses me and I'm able to move. I shake my head once, hard and fast. Mikey shifts in his seat. You know, your brother. I'm not sure what he's going to say, and maybe he isn't so sure either because he stops himself right there. See you around. And he peels off, turning back onto the road and racing out of sight, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. I stand right where I am, taking one long, shaky breath, and wait until my heart slows down. What would my dad say if he saw me as scared as this? What would my brother say? I know what my brother would say. No way you can live your life as a coward. If you're always too busy hiding, then you're not really living, are you? I've taken another long breath and keep on walking. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I think the opening pages of both books do a great job of establishing the tone and the setting for the rest of the novels. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, can you all start by talking a bit about the process of writing the books and what were you both reading, if anything, while you were writing?
It's interesting to me, Kacen, because Stealing Mount Rushmore is about a girl whose mother has deserted her, and your Hurricane Child is the same, and A Stitch in Time is a grief narrative. My first book, in King of the Dragonflies, is also a grief narrative. So I found it kind of interesting, the parallels. I wanted to explore a time in 1974 when there were a lot of questions about presidents and history. It was a time when Nixon, the summer that Nixon was almost impeached and had to resign. And I wanted to look at that through the eyes of a 13-year-old girl as things were changing all around her. And she's stuck in her family with a father and 3 brothers. And she's saddled with the responsibilities for the household because her mother is left. And part of the story is about her coming to realize that maybe that's not something she has to do, that she can start to question her role in the family. It's also about forgiveness. Because it always annoyed me when people would tell kids, you need to forgive because she's your mother, as though that was an automatic, as though they really had no choice. It wasn't about what the mother had done, how the child felt. It was mothers were somehow sainted forever. And I think it's a very cruel thing to tell a child. I think to tell anyone that they have to forgive. I think people have to come to in their own time to forgiveness if they're willing to. And I wanted to communicate that in the story. And I think Kacen, in Hurricane Child, you address some of the similar issues about people, the adults around Caroline who were pushing her to forgive. And she needed to find her own pace to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting that oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, as you were saying that about forgiveness, my mind went straight to Caroline and her mom. And also a lot of school visits I've had where that was one of the most popular questions was students asking, why did Caroline forgive her mom? And kind of wanting to have a discussion around whether she should have forgiven her or whether it's like necessary to forgive someone who's hurt you. So I think that I like that you put that in your book or that you were conscious of that, because I think that that's something young people think a lot about, is whether because they're young, also a lot of adults kind of just assume that they have to forgive adults for the mistakes that we make.
Yeah. And I think that in Stealing Mount Rushmore, the parents are pretty rotten. The mom leaves and the dad crawls into bed depressed. He's a short order cook, and he's not overtly mean, but he neglects her. And I think kids need to hear that story about parents who are pretty incompetent, whether overtly so or just out of just neglect. Yeah, I think it's important, and I really appreciated that in Hurricane Child and in King and the Dragonflies. I loved the parents in that book. Yeah. I felt that they were lost in terms of King's search for identity, and they really didn't know. They had no tools for understanding, and I loved their arc of coming to understanding and King coming to trust them. It was quite beautiful the way you carved that out.
Thank you. Well, as you were speaking about your book, also, I was thinking about just the way that as adults, a lot of us have our own cycles of harm from when we were younger. And so we kind of just continue these cycles where we're not overtly, as you said, like abusing, but we're still kind of hurting people silently because of our own emotional wounds. So it sounds like that's a theme, I guess, that's in both of our books, and something I think is important for young readers to learn about and be aware of.
Yes, and for there to be hope, yep. but also for it to be real. And I one thing that I found really interesting is in my first book, my grief narrative, it's an 11-year-old and her name is Donut. It's a long story, but her name is Donut, and she's really angry at the world, at everything, because her father's died. She never knew her mother, and she's in a rage. And I got some interesting feedback from some folks that just couldn't tolerate a girl being so angry. And they really reacted strongly, and they could not understand this character. They could not connect to this character. And Carolyn is a really ticked off character too. And I wondered if you've had those reactions, because I think if it was a male character, there's lots of male characters in middle grade books that are really angry and kick things and throw things. And I don't think we get the same response that we do to female characters who are really ticked.
Yeah, that's an important point to bring up. And I think that it becomes there's another layer to Caroline in the fact that she's also Black and she's also West Indian. And, that I was kind of conscious of the fact that a lot of people look at Black girls as stereotypically angry. And what does it mean to be angry despite that and angry because of that? And to be able to own your anger and not push it aside. That was all things I was definitely aware of as I was writing Caroline's character, and also aware of as I was writing King's character, and really wanting to push against the idea that Black boys are expected to be angry. I wanted him to be softer. I wanted him to be angry in his own right when it was realistically so and justifiably so, but also to basically, as we would say in the millennium generation, I guess, like a soft boy. Like he's a lot softer. He's a lot like being able to play with that archetype was important for me for King also.
Yeah, I really appreciated King. There was none of the sort of toxic masculinity going on with his character, and yet he was very strong and pushed through. So that was lovely.
Yeah, I didn't talk about the process yet. Mine, or which books I read as I was writing King. Definitely was reading Jason Reynolds' Ghost was definitely just the voice in general, I feel like is such a masterpiece. Like everything is just a masterpiece about that book. But I feel like whenever I'm just trying to remember how to actually let voice like take over the story and let a character kind of like emulate on the page so strongly, I go back to look at that because I think it's just a masterpiece at voice and that character. And for the process, it was a lot. It's very funny to kind of like talk about the process for this particular book because it was different, I think, than usual processes for my books. Basically, it started when I was having dinner with my editor, Andrea Davis Pinkney, and she mentioned that she'd never seen a Black gay boy in middle grade before. And I realized I hadn't either. I'm sure it exists, but I just haven't seen it before. And that kind of sparked the inspiration for writing this book. And the entire process was very kind of like dreamlike for me. I'm very interested in dreams and dream interpretation and dreamology. So it did feel, and I recently wrote a piece about it for the Horn book about just dreams in general. And dreams are a major theme and like important in the book, as well as King has dreams consistently about his brother after he's passed, coming back to him and having conversations with him. So it was just it kind of just like flowed out of me. I felt like it was a funny experience where I blinked and it was suddenly written, and that's very rare. I'm so grateful because usually it's like,
that's nice.
Yeah, usually it's like pulling teeth. So I was really grateful that really came out of me so more smoothly than usual. And yeah, I like to mention it because I think it was like a nice note that at the end, I was also like in the beginning of this reading, I had King asking like, why a dragonfly? And at the end of the book, I asked myself the same question, like, why a dragonfly? Why not another animal that comes to King? And dragonflies in dreams and just like across the world, symbolically have meant kind of like a new beginning or transition or transformation. So I thought that was interesting, that it felt like a dream that this book had been written, and then there was like a symbol that prominent that came through too.
Dragonflies are my whip is actually that I started 10 some years ago is an insect road trip with a dragonfly, a housefly, and a honeybee. So I know a lot about dragonflies. It was really cracking me up that I'm going, oh my God, there's so many parallels here. But it's very scientific, but they talk. So what can I do? But anyway, and she is a important character to me. And I have a real thing about dragonflies. They're quite remarkable animals and amazing predators as well.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
They are.
I wanted to ask you, because it was impressive to me that you were an educator for 20 plus years. That's really great. My mom was an educator also for about as long, I think. She retired. But I just know that, I mean, of course, it's like one of the most important jobs, but I just feel even more connected to educators, I think, because of that. So I was also like wondering how being an educator has affected your process or how you approach writing in general, writing for children.
Well, I taught in outside of Boston, in Massachusetts, and then I taught in California, in the Bay Area, and then I taught in Vermont. So I've sort of had a taste of very different groups of kids. I had never lived in the country before I moved to Vermont, so that was all kind of a shocker too. But I think what I loved most when I taught elementary school was you can close the door and create a world. And you have this incredible community of kids for an entire year. And it's just unbelievably powerful. The hardest thing for me was the end of the year when I had to give all my kids up. And it was really, really difficult because you create such a bond. And we would go out and study. I had all these rubber boots. I had 75 pairs of rubber boots, and I had to outfit my kids and every year because I needed a range of sizes. And we'd go out stomping in puddles and take dissolved oxygen tests. And we had tanks full of dragonfly larvae and damselfly larvae and toe biters in the classroom. The dragonflies would actually emerge in the classroom from their nymphal state and fly around. Really cool. And when my new class would show up in the fall, I would like, who are you? Go away. I can't bear to bond with another group of kids and then give you all up. But I managed. And then I would fall in love with all of them again. I think what I loved the most and what inspired me as a writer, I wasn't a writer then, was reading aloud to kids for 20 years from such a wide range of fiction and nonfiction. And you sort of internalize those voices and the rhythms and the cadence over those years. And I think that really stands me in good stead, just having done that. And I've just known zillions of kids deeply. And that's why I write. I just want to tell stories for kids to read.
Yeah, I love that. Where did you keep all the boots in the classroom?
I had bins.
Okay.
I had bins, and then I used nail polish, and then we'd have fitting in the beginning of the year, and then I would put numbers on the toes with nail polish so they could find them again.
And then wipe it off with nail polish at the end of the year.
With the whatever that stuff is.
Yeah, the nail polish remover, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. They were pretty ripe by the end of the year, but I would air them out over the summer. They were probably pretty toxic actually, but no one ever got sick. Yeah. Because when the kids got too deep in the creek, they would fill up, and that was always the rite of passage. So it was pretty stinky, but it was wonderful.
I love that.
So the main characters in both of your books, as we discussed, they're both dealing with grief, but they're also taking on responsibilities of caring for those around them. How do you think each of your characters dealt with that responsibility?
Go for it, Kacen.
I think I need a moment to think about it, if you happen to have an answer.
I don't think grief is something people call it a journey, but I don't think it is, because I don't think there's an end point. I think it's something you learn to carry with you for the rest of your life. you change yourself. You don't come out at the other end the same person. So I don't think of it so much as a journey as a learning to not have that person there. And I think for my character Donut, who lost her dad, and they had this really intimate relationship because it was just the two of them in this house in Vermont. And she was really, really angry, and she didn't want anything to change, because by not having anything change, maybe it didn't happen. And she also had no one to hold her. And I don't think you can cry and feel that deep, deep pain unless you have someone to hold on to you, or you fall into a million pieces. And so this was a kid that was really suffering. But I think also kids are very resilient, and she also had adventures at the same time. And it might seem contradictory, but when I've seen kids in my classrooms who have had really difficult things happen, they also can laugh, and they also can play hopscotch or whatever it is, or foursquare, and get out of themselves. And I think that's how we survive. I'm sort of rambling here, but it's a difficult topic. But I think kids need to see it on the page, because kids have losses all the time, and they need to see that you can learn to carry it with you.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about how when I was that age, I struggled so much with, I hadn't lost anyone in my life, but I just dealt with severe mental health issues, a lot of depression. For me, there was no hope. It was just like, there's absolutely zero hope in life. And I think that's why, like, listening to you speak about teaching through books that there can be hope, or like at least putting it on the page, even if, it's up to the young reader whether they want to feel that hope themselves or not, but to at least be able to put it on the page, I felt personally like that was very important for my middle grade books also, and probably why I relate so much and why I feel so pulled and drawn into writing for that age category, because I feel like it is just kind of more connected to that category or that age range, this kind of like constant feeling of hope.
Yeah. Huh.
I don't know about whether Caroline or King really felt as much of a responsibility to care for the people around them, but I think it was more that through their pain and through their growth that people around them learned that they had to grow and change also. Like, Carly, I think that's what you asked before, right? Like, I'm not just writing this here. Yeah, like I'm thinking of King, for example, with his growth, he never, my mind just went a zillion different directions. Sorry, I have ADHD. I was thinking about how it's like also National Coming Out Day, and how that connects back to the book, where with King, he felt kind of like pressure at times to come out about himself, about as a gay person, and how it feels important to me to also put into books that you don't actually, like, I don't think it's, I think that there's a reason why we celebrate coming out, because it's been like such a hard history for queer people. But there's also like a bit of a backlash in the other direction, where it's like it almost implies that you're being like dishonest, or you're not being courageous if you don't come out. So I wanted to be sure to also put in that you do not have to come out in order to be brave or courageous. So King like picks and chooses who he wants to come out to. This all relates back to him learning and growing, and people having to learn and grow with him, because he did have to kind of learn a lesson along those lines. And his father was on an arc as well of like learning to accept his son's sexuality and identity, and knowing that he loves him, and that's enough. And that's the only thing that really matters when it comes to whether he can accept King or not. So I think that it was more like everyone else, like the main characters, Caroline and King, had their own arcs and their own journeys to grow, and everyone else kind of had to like shift themselves in positive directions along with the main character's growth too.
It was interesting when Sandy had told King, and then he sort of blew the cover on it, which is, I guess I understand more clearly why you have that in there, because Sandy was being very particular about who he told. He was choosing, he was controlling who knew and who didn't for a good reason. And I understand better now why that's in the book. That's really helpful. In terms of that pressure, in terms of making clear that it's a choice and not a sort of badge of honor. And yeah, I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's what I'm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think one of the things we have in common in the books too is the environment as a character. Particularly in my Vermont book, I felt that the environment was clearly a character in the book, very important character, and so is the Virgin Islands in yours. And I wondered how that felt writing it, and how you think that shapes the narrative.
Yeah, I think everything always comes back to character in a way, and setting is like an important choice in making sure that the character's arc is reflected in the setting. So for me, it was important to choose a place like the Virgin Islands, where there's that history of the Caribbean in general, but there is unfortunately like a history of anti-queerness in colonization of the Caribbean, and how that plays into Caroline and her acceptance of herself. Felt important as like a choice to place it in my hometown, because that's where I was born and raised. And then also I think it depends on who you're talking to, of whether it's magical realism or whether it's just contemporary realism. But the lore of like this woman in black and like the spirits and everything that Caroline can see that other people can't see, that was very important, because the Caribbean is just, I mean, personally, when I go there, I can just feel like spirits touching me. Like it's just a very like ghost-rich place. So it felt important to place it there for that reason as well. And I'm curious if that like character influenced your choice in Vermont in any way.
Well, my main character, Donut, runs away to a camp, a deserted camp on a pond, dog pond, and there's a bear, and she sees the bear out the window, and the bear is hooting across the pond to another bear. And for me, it's a really important moment. And she feels really attached to the bear, and she knows she shouldn't be messing with a bear because bears sort of run the show. But she leaves an apple out for the bear, and then it comes back. And she watches it eat the apple in the moonlight. And for me, and hoot, and bears sound like they're barking when they're calling. Okay. And so the bear is barking across the pond, and there's another bear. And it's very much her dad, and very much, it's certainly not magical realism, but it's her relationship to the natural world and getting comfort from that. And strangely, throughout the book, she's learning taxidermy, which is kind of so she's sort of communing with the dead throughout the book, stitching up little mice and stuffing them, because her godfather is a taxidermist who taxidermies a moose throughout the story, named Ichabod in his parlor, and she sets mouse traps in her camp because they keep eating her chocolate, and she gets really ticked off. But in the end, she decides to not kill her favorite mouse that she sees around. So I think the creatures in the camp are her relationship, and her provide her with nurturing presence, I think. So it's very important. I think we're almost done, huh?
I know. I have one more question. Carly, do you have another question?
No, take it away.
I'm wondering, Daphne, what you're working on next, or if you are going to be writing another middle grade novel.
It's my insect road trip. Hate to tell you, but
right.
it's
Well, is that younger middle grade, or is it like 8 to 12 age range?
middle grade. It's middle grade. It's set in the Smithsonian Insect Zoo, and Tonalai is the main character. She's a nymph in the tank, because dragonflies spend maybe 3 years as nymphs, as water bugs.
Oh, wow.
And then they emerge, and they only live for about 3 months as dragonflies. So they have a really long adolescence. Anyway, so Tonalai is in the tank, and she wants to see the blue sky. And Tombo, the old dragonfly nymph, has told her all these stories. He's the only one that's seen it, and she wants to see the blue sky. So she escapes, and the rest of the nymphs in the tank thinks she's foolish. She can't find her way out, and she runs across Melly, who's a ditzy honeybee who just wants to find her sisters because she's in the wrong hive, and Mo, who's sort of the culture broker between humans and them, because he's a housefly, so he's co-evolved with humans, so he knows all their tricks. And they finally get out. He helps them get out, and there's lots of adventures, but the thing is that they have to learn to get along because Tonalai is a predator. And so there's this tension in the beginning. And there's a scene towards the beginning of they're all sitting on Abe Lincoln's shoulder in the Lincoln Memorial. And all Mo has to say is, boy, those are big swatting hands. So anyway, there's a lot of humor in it. I needed to write something light because, yeah. And what about you, Kacen?
Well, you're writing something light, and it does sound really delightful. So I'm excited for you. I'm writing something in the opposite direction, which is all about a main character who's struggling with mental health and the will to live, which is a very difficult book to write right now with everything that's happening. So
yeah,
but it feels very important. So I'm excited about it in the sense that I think it might be helpful to young readers.
For middle grade?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is a hard one to write right now. I mean, writing it all right now is a challenge. That sounds incredible.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank you both for having this discussion today. It was a lot of fun. And I would like to thank everyone for attending. And again, the book purchase links for the session are posted in the chat, or you can visit Parnassus Books online festival store at parnassusbooks.net/SFB. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.